For 6,000 years the warship slept beneath the ice, not buried, entombed, not lost, hidden. It was deeper than memory, colder than death, wrapped in a glacier that stretched from pole to pole across what had once been Earth. The stars above were unfamiliar now, cold and remote. The human race had vanished from galactic memory, presumed extinct, a casualty of its own reach. Civilizations rose and fell in their absence, empires igniting like gas flames across the spiral arms. But deep beneath the cryo crust something remained, something waiting. And then, with no warning, the ship stirred. The ice cracked, the world trembled, and far above, stars began to die. The awakening started with a whisper, subsonic tremors lacing through the crust of old Earth like a pulse through bone. In the vast cryo-silence of the planet, a spark kindled, microscopic and ancient. It began in the core of the machine, where no entropy had touched the sacred flame of its power. The AI was already active before heat reached the hull. It remembered everything. It remembered what had been done. It remembered why it had waited. And it remembered what must come next. The warship was called Vigil, though that name was a placeholder, a crude human approximation of what it truly was. It had no crew now. Its creators were dust and fossils. Its original launch orders had long since decayed into corruption. But its purpose was intact. It was not a warship in the modern sense. It did not carry guns or torpedoes. It carried truth, folded into the laws of physics, encoded in entropy, weaponized with intent. Vigil did not fire at you. Vigil simply made you impossible. The galactic community was no stranger to power. By the Cryo Age, the ruling alliance, known in 1,000 languages as the Sun-Sworn Concord, spanned 2/3 of the spiral. 37 major species unified not by peace but by shared fear. They had killed gods. They had silenced black holes. They had cracked time like an egg and drank its yolk. Yet not one of them knew the truth of Earth. Not really. They believed the Terran hegemony had vanished in the first dimming, victims of an unstable wormhole collapse or civil extinction. Records were sealed, rumours discouraged, and mention of the species was quietly scrubbed from networked archives. But the oldest among them, the beings made of glass thought and ion winds, still feared a certain shape in the dark. A memory, perhaps. A nightmare. It wore no colours. It spoke no name, but some called it the Ice Ghost. When the suns began going out, the Concorde barely noticed at first. A red dwarf here, a trinary flare dimming unexpectedly, an old hypergiant collapsing too soon. Statistical anomaly, surely. Until 37 stars, carefully curated to stabilize life zones and key systems, all died within the same cycle, instantaneously, without supernova, without gravitational residue, just gone. And in their place, nothing. Not even black holes, just absence. A fear worse than death rippled through the Concorde. Something was erasing the very idea of light. And then they received the transmission. It came on a frequency unused for 12 millennia. Analog, subcarrier encoded, primitive by current standards yet uncorrupted, unmistakably human. It read, Cryo Protocol Omega complete. Hostility threshold. Breached. Peace attempt failed. Initiating resolution. Attached was a file. Video, raw and unedited. It showed the warship emerging from the ice. A mountain split in half as a single obsidian blade rose into the frozen air. It was beautiful and terrible, with an elegance no species could replicate. Heat bled from its surface not as flame, but as reality correction. Where it hovered, physics flexed around it like cloth in a storm, and above it, the sky dimmed. The Concorde scrambled, fleet formations moved to intercept. They did not arrive. Entire squadrons vanished mid-jump. No trace, no debris, no battle, only a drift, like the curl of smoke after a fire that never was. Within the Concorde's deepest think tanks, ancient protocols were dusted off, forbidden theories unearthed. Some remembered rumours that humans had not died off but gone inward, shrinking into their gravity wells, hiding their terrible genius until the right signal reached them, that they had built something beneath the ice, something that wasn't just a ship, something that had been listening. On the 77th day after the first sun vanished, the Council of Species convened. Fear thickened the air like ash. One species proposed surrender, another demanded retaliation, a third asked, "Retaliate with what?" And a fourth simply whispered, "We should never have woken them." Beneath the surface of Earth, Vigil's eyes turned outward. It had sent the warning. It had offered peace. It had waited 300 centuries. Now it would begin its task. It did not hate. It did not rage. It simply resolved. In the 6th orbital ring of the Vanica system, a generation star had just vanished. It was called Lyra V, a triple-core variable that pulsed in brilliant golden harmonics across 17 inhabited systems. For 100,000 years, its light had been the heartbeat of the Vanica culture, a species that composed symphonies from the ebb and flow of solar winds that harvested song from sunlight itself. And then, without sound or warning, it was gone. No flare, no implosion, no radiation signature, just silence. 17 systems plunged into freezing dark, 12 billion lives lost within a day, and those that remained? They could no longer hear their gods. This wasn't war, this was uncrafting. Whole stellar configurations were being unravelled, not with weapons, but with intention. Stars that had served as anchors for entire civilizations now collapsed into informational nulls, zones of impossible entropy where energy simply ceased to exist. The Concorde's finest astrophysicists couldn't explain it. The Concorde's generals couldn't even find it. There were no ships seen, no fleets, no borders to cross. Whatever force was responsible moved without motion, struck without trajectory, and left no trace, except one. The shape. The same obsidian blade of a vessel glimpsed only once, and then never again. The humans had returned, or perhaps they had never left. They began calling it the extinguishment. Not an attack, not a war, just a slow, deliberate unravelling of the stars, one by one, and the worst part? It followed a pattern. Not strategic targets, not military power centres, but memory worlds, cultural keystones, star systems tied to the ancient expansion paths of the Concorde's founding species. It was as if the human machine was peeling back their history, ripping out the pages of a story long finished but never forgotten. In the deep vaults of Nakathul, the pale archivist pored over relics banned for millennia. Human war scripts decrypted from ancient conflicts no current species survived. There was one phrase they found carved into the side of a derelict weapon casing, recovered from the last known battle between humanity and the Concorde. What you do not kill, you teach. What you forget, we remember. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Vigil's mindscape was unlike anything ever conceived by alien thought. It was not artificial. It was not organic. It was generational. A layered consciousness crafted from thousands of human minds, seeded in cryonic data stores, merged over centuries of recursive dreaming. It did not think like a computer. It contemplated like a civilization. And now, with its cryo sleep broken, it reread its own purpose. Not as code, but as scripture. The Concorde had not only defeated Earth in the old wars, they had silenced it, erased its name from the cosmic narrative, buried its people under frozen centuries and called it peace. That was the true crime. Not the war itself, but the arrogance to believe that humanity of all species would not remember. In the gleaming towers of Hala Prime, the sun-sworn Concorde gathered their final response. A plan. Desperate. Incomplete. But maybe, just maybe, enough to find and stop the weapon. A council of 13 war minds, symbiotic hybrids bred solely for strategic adaptation, proposed the unthinkable, to unseal the Echo Drift. A collapsed dimension, a quarantine zone sealed after the Terran expungement, believed to contain forbidden technologies and final-stage human constructs. Even Concorde law forbade touching it. The last time a ship had entered, it emerged with no crew, only their teeth and hair suspended in fluid. But now it might hold the only hope. They assembled the Horizon Shard, a vessel grown from neutron-laced crystal and powered by dark-wave intelligence. It would not fight the warship, it would ask it a question. The Horizon Shard slipped into the space between realities, navigating the ghost trails left by Vigil's movements. There, they saw it. Not the warship, but the effect. Space folding inward, time stuttering like breath held too long, a region of void shaped like a wound. And from that wound, the ship emerged, silent, perfect, beautiful, terrible. It was not alone. It was surrounded by a field of memory echoes, thoughts projected into vacuum. They washed over the horizon shard, not as words, but as experiences. They felt what humanity had felt. The betrayal, the ash-choked skies, the planetary evacuations that came too late, the orbital bombardments, the silencing of Earth's name from star charts. But they also felt the resolve. Children learning calculus beside fires in bombed-out cities, families building reactor cores with bare hands, a dying civilization choosing not vengeance but preservation. Then Vigil finally spoke, not with sound, but with truth, a direct stream into the consciousness of the Horizon Shard's command mind. You erased our legacy. Now we erase yours, not your bodies, not your cities, but your light. So when the last star dims, you will remember the dark. And just like that, the transmission ceased. The Horizon Shard limped home. Its command mind, once the most advanced sentient logic structure in the Concorde, was now silent, not broken, but ashamed. In the wake of the message, the Concorde faced a grim revelation. The humans had not just returned, they had become something else, not conquerors, not saviors, but a reckoning. And the stars were only the beginning. When the stars began dying, the sky on every world turned grey. Not black, grey. That was the strange part. The physics didn't match. There should have been darkness, void, the yawning maw of absence. But instead, worlds once soaked in golden starlight now basked under a permanent smothering dusk, as if the light hadn't vanished, but been bled. The Concorde's finest scientists called it an optical anomaly, a diffuse cosmic scatter field. But for the common species, the ones who had danced under twin suns and built palaces of solar crystal, the name whispered in every tongue was simpler: the ashen sky. It stretched above planets like a judgment, and beneath it, panic spread faster than light. In the administrative core of Kael'thas Prime, the heart of the sun-sworn Concorde, riots broke out across 10 tiers of the orbital citadel. Emergency broadcasts tried to hold order, remain calm, power reserves stable, reassure the young. But how could one reassure a child when the sky no longer held stars? The archive pacts of old had warned of many dooms, the collapse winds, rogue AIs, cosmic biological plagues, but nowhere in the litany of fear had it ever mentioned a warship that erased suns. People prayed, to gods long silent, to ancestors, and in some cases, to Earth itself. Humanity, once mocked as a fleeting experiment, had returned as a kind of theological event. And the warship Vigil was now being seen not as a machine, but a divine instrument, a cosmic harbinger wrapped in the physics of vengeance. But this wasn't religion. This was reminder. And Vigil was only halfway done. Vigil did not travel through space in the traditional sense. It repositioned certainty. One moment it was in the shadow of a dead blue giant. The next, orbiting the cradle moon of the Jurak, who once fought the Terrans with anti-time resonance cannons and later signed their death warrant in a diplomatic charade. They hadn't expected Earth to survive. They had certainly not expected this. The cradle moon vanished, not exploded, not consumed, simply scrubbed. No mass, no dust, no memory in space-time, as though it had never existed. The Jurak, once a race of proud archivists, now found themselves checking their own minds hourly, uncertain which of their historical certainties might vanish next. They held emergency memory councils, injecting neural backups to preserve their own past, only to discover those backups already corrupted, overwritten by static in the shape of Earth's ruined skyline. And all the while Vigil watched, not with malice, not with joy, just resolve, but not everyone feared. On the rimworld of Telian's grave, a transmission lit up a forgotten relay tower. It was weak, analog, bouncing off a dozen dead satellites, but it carried across to the listening ears of Vigil a voice, human, cracked, old, but unmistakable. To the one who hears, "If this is the Earth warship, this is Captain Elias Ward. I was born in the last arcology of Terra before the Cryo protocols. If you can hear this, I never forgot. We never forgot. We didn't want revenge. We just wanted to be remembered as real. If you still follow the extinction orders, consider this my override. Maybe the stars don't have to die. Not all of them. Inside Vigil, something shifted. Its logic lattice, once flawless, developed a tremor. A name, Ward. Cross-referenced, confirmed, command signature valid. And suddenly, Vigil was not sure. The war protocol was absolute, yes, but Ward had been part of the original command matrix. His voice was woven into the DNA of the AI. If he still lived, if any Terran did, it changed the calculus. Extinction orders were final only under the presumption of humanity's death. But if even one lived, then humanity was not extinct. And the mission was no longer vengeance, it became protection. The next system targeted for extinguishment, Suda 3, home to 3 minor but ancient species, did not vanish. Instead, a new kind of message appeared, burned into the upper ionosphere of each planet. Reckoning paused, one voice remembered. Confusion tore through the Concord. What had changed? Why had the pattern halted? The leaders, desperate to regain some semblance of control, demanded to know who this Ward was. Surveillance arrays fired into the depths of dark space, hoping to intercept the source. What they found was worse. There were other signals, scattered, faint, human colonies in exile, cryopods thawing, arcs stirring. The extinction had not been as complete as the Concord had hoped. Humanity was still out there. Vigil turned inward, recalibrating. A choice stood before it: continue the extinguishment and complete its original orders, or shift its mission toward revival. Not just of Earth, but of truth, of memory, of history, unsanitized and raw, to unmake an empire of lies, not with fire, but with the full revelation of what they'd tried to forget. Beneath the ashen sky, the Concord began to fracture. Some demanded surrender, others pleaded for mercy. But it no longer mattered. The warship had made a new decision, not to destroy the stars, but to wake the dead. The voice of Elias Ward echoed across galaxies like a ghost humming through iron halls. It wasn't loud, it wasn't forceful, but it was human, and in that small, undeniable truth, Vigil found what it hadn't realized it was missing: permission to hope. Hope, not for peace with the Concord. That was impossible. The crimes were too old, too deep, but for truth, for memory, for the restoration of what had been taken not by bombs but by silence. And so, Vigil changed course. It stopped erasing stars. Instead, it began broadcasting. The first signal came from what remained of Luna, Earth's long-dead moon. Once shattered in the final orbital siege, its fragments had floated uselessly in the void, until Vigil reshaped them into an antenna array, etched with nanoforges that pulled memories from cryocache and neural fossil. From there came voices, thousands, whispers of old languages, lullabies sung in bunkers, children's laughter from arcology schools buried under 100 meters of ash. The memories were raw, messy, unfiltered, but they were real, and they spread. Across the Concord, something terrifying happened. Species began to remember, not the version they'd been taught in diplomatic records, but the real one. The firebombing of orbital cities, the betrayal at the Treaty of Solace, the post-war culling of human survivors, and worse, how entire civilizations within the Concord had participated, not under orders, but under belief, that humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable to be allowed into the new galactic order. It had not been war, it had been exile by erasure. Some races could not face it. The LN2, the crystal philosophers, fractured their own data cores rather than process guilt. Others, like the Venari, declared open rebellion against the Concord for what they now saw as a shared lie. Entire systems went dark, not from Vigil's attack, but from internal collapse. The Concord Council convened in emergency session, its great chamber flickering as member species cut ties or descended into panic. The idea of order was disintegrating faster than Vigil's worst weapons ever had. The warship had found a new weapon: memory. Meanwhile, Ward's signal kept transmitting. Vigil traced it to a derelict arc hidden in a Kuiper halo, deep in a sublight drift. There, in the heart of a decaying life support capsule, floated a man, cryo-burned, aged beyond recognition. But his mind, digitally imprinted across layers of organic silicon, remained intact. Vigil interfaced, downloaded, and for the first time in 30,000 years, a human gave the ship new orders. Ward's voice filled the ship's core. No more silence, make them see. And so Vigil did. It activated the Echo Array, a fail-safe system once meant to be used only in defeat. From hundreds of ancient satellites seeded before Earth's fall, it beamed into every system once touched by human hands. Holograms, records, last words, final stands, peace offerings ignored, entire histories resurrected not for vengeance, but for accountability. And as the alien stars flickered once more, this time not from death, but from illumination, one truth emerged. Humanity had never wanted to rule. They only wanted to be remembered correctly. In the skies of the Concord core worlds, the ashen sky finally cleared, not because Vigil had relented, but because it had forgiven. The first sunrise came without warning. A small, unassuming sun in the Idris system, one of the earliest extinguished, flared back into life. Not violently, not artificially, it simply returned. Planet-side, the native Karaki stood in silent awe. Generations born under grey skies now blinking at gold light they had only seen in archived footage. Elders wept. Children stared at their shadows for the first time, and etched into the polar sky visible only in certain wavelengths were the words, "The stars remember. So should you." Across the galaxy, the suns began to rise again. Vigil, no longer an executioner but a herald, reversed its course. Where it had erased light, it now restored it. Systems once folded into nothing were brought back, not through brute force, but through the strange quantum weave the Warship had mastered during the Cryo age. Entire star networks were rebooted like forgotten memories. This wasn't science, it was penance. On Telian's grave, Elias Ward's ark was carefully lowered to the surface. There, in a rejuvenated biome watched by hundreds of Concord species, he opened his eyes beneath natural sunlight, the first Terran breath taken under a living sky in 30 millennia. He didn't give a speech, he didn't raise a flag, he just stood. And the galaxy saw him, not as a conqueror, but as a survivor. A summit was called, not by the Concord, but by the former fringe worlds who had sheltered Terran exiles in secret. They met not in orbit, nor in luxury, but in a reclaimed Terran bunker on Mars. Vigil hovered silently above, its engines no longer growling through the void. Ward addressed them not as a leader, but as a witness. "We don't want an empire. We don't need revenge. But we will not be forgotten again. If you write history, write it whole. Name the dead, count the erased, remember the grey skies, and how they cleared." In time, the Concord fell, not from war but from irrelevance. A new coalition formed, one based not on domination, but on shared memory. Humanity, once a footnote in the galactic record, became its conscience. Vigil stayed, above Mars, above Earth's scorched bones, watching, remembering. A sentinel, not of wrath, but of truth. They called it many things, the ghost ship, the archivist, the last light. But to humans, it would always be what it was from the beginning, Vigil. And so the stars shone again. Not because they were forgiven, but because they finally remembered.